In this exciting episode, Paul Drake Jr.'s gone. William Catt, we hardly knew ye. Meanwhile, Perry gets his professor on, and one of his students gets murdered while another is charged with that murder. I wouldn't hold your breath about those teaching evals, Perry. It's the 10th Perry Mason made-for-TV movie, 1989's The Case of the Lethal Lesson. Welcome to the Perry Pod. I'm your humble host, Jonathan Searcy. My purpose, pretty simple, provide an audio companion to every episode of television's greatest legal drama, Perry Mason. Each episode, we give you a summary of the plot. We even compare plots with the Earl Stanley Gardner novel, if the episode was an adaptation. And in this episode, we get back to reviewing some of those made-for-TV movies, too. We give you a little trivia, reveal the episode's theme, and revel in a Perry proverb. That's a pearl of wisdom from the man himself. Before we head to the water cooler, where just like Perry, Della, and Paul, we can discuss the ins and outs of our fave legal cruise adventures. But first, say it with me, to the law library! In this trip to the law library, we discuss video piracy. When I say that a small video piracy ring plays a small role in this film, I mean small. The whole thing smacks of a plot cul-de-sac that gives our defendant and his on-again, off-again fiance the chance to buddy cop it up and get that runtime up to 90 minutes.
Let me give you some free legal advice. Right now, all we got on you is pirating video cassettes. Make us go someplace we don't want to go. And we're talking major felony territory.
We don't really get closure once they're busted. We just know they don't have anything to do with the murder. So, you've led a large-scale video piracy ring, one that you're willing to protect with a gun. What's at stake once you've been caught? You and your cronies would have violated the Copyright Act of 1976. You'd have to deal with a conspiracy charge because there was more than one of you, of course. And then you'd have to address the whole interstate transportation of stolen property thing if you were moving those tapes, say, from Denver, Colorado, the setting of the movie, and Laramie, Wyoming. We might also get a wire fraud charge in there, too, if you and your cronies were using the phones to set up and execute your perfidious scheme. You see how this could get complicated really quickly? Penalties could vary depending on the scale of the operation and whether or not it was your first offense, but generally, if it was your first time getting caught, you get up to 5 years in prison and a fine of up to $250,000. If you had done it more than once, that could be up to 10 years in prison, still with a fine of $250,000. But that's just the criminal charges. Once we move over to civil charges, you might have to pay up to $20,000 per infringed work. And you're going to have to make restitution to copyright holders for lost revenues. You're going to be paying for this one for a while. Now, let's get to the plot of our movie, shall we? The Case of the Lethal Lesson. We open on a beautiful day. The McLaren School of Law. Bicycle riders approaching the building. You know, just another day in Law Mecca, Denver, Colorado. Inside a moot court, we see a staged trial. A prosecutor is trying to get some info out of a witness, but the defense lawyer keeps pulling tricks like these out of his back pocket.
And when did you search for the gun?
Objection, absolutely no foundation. Furthermore, the prosecutor, though well-meaning, is leading the witness just a trifle.
Meanwhile, Perry Mason looks on in the Panopticon, a fortress of monitors that allows us to see everyone's face in the court, including our bicycling defendant. Perry provides some exposition on the fortress to a white-haired friend.
Well, the courtroom is configured so that the jury faces the proceedings. Notice the television monitor in front of them.
Oh, miss a beat.
If the attention of any one of the jury stray from the proceedings, he can immediately focus on the monitor, which is covering the action.
Then we find out what the room's tech geek thinks of himself.
The way I got this place rigged, nobody can run it but me. Keeps me indispensable.
The defense lawyer and the judge get into it, and Frank, Perry's white-haired friend, laps it all up. And we discover why. The showing out defense lawyer is none other than Frank's son, Frank Jr.
Well, I call that aggressive advocacy.
Perry isn't too happy about how things went down.
I don't believe what I just saw. It borders on the incomprehensible.
Perry finds prosecutor Scott McDonald wanting in his duty, and Kimberly McDonald, Scott's sister, tries to save Scott's bacon, and Perry's not having it.
Miss McDonald, you're his sister, and your loyalty is commendable. But, Mr. McDonald, as a prosecutor, your duty is to prevent defense counsel from misusing the rules of evidence.
As for Frank Wellman Jr., Perry is scarcely more praiseworthy. Frank Wellman Jr. is a disaster waiting to happen, whether or not he is the kid of Perry's old law school friend. And when Wellman responds with thanks, Perry leaves him with this zinger.
When you make your summation tomorrow, use some sincerity.
Cut to outside on campus where a sincere act of heartbreak is happening. Ken, the defendant, Molansky, is dishing with Heather McDonald. She's been playing hard to get in touch with, and Ken's feelings are hurt. When Ken drops by later at Kimberly's apartment and she's quiet about what's going on, her roommate, one Miss Lehman, drops this bombshell.
About Frank Jr.
Before you know it, he's drunk, too drunk to drive, and she had to drive him home.
Go on.
All of a sudden, he threw her down on the floor, ripped open her blouse, and tried to rape her.
Angry Ken goes back to the classroom, aka the moot court, to see if he can punch a little sense into Frank Jr. And when he gets inside, he gets a big surprise.
Hold it right there!
Frank Wellman. He's dead.
Fortunately, Ken happens to know a pretty great attorney to help him out of a tough spot. Oh yeah, it's his professor. But the conflict of interest, Perry might have to talk about this one with his pal Frank.
There are several top defense attorneys in Denver. I'll speak to one first thing in the morning.
I called you.
Ken, I'll find you the very best.
I want to be a lawyer. I worked hard to get into this school, and I don't want it taken away from me for something I didn't do. You always told us that the accused is entitled to the best possible defense. And you're the best defense attorney I could have. I'm innocent, and I need someone to believe that. Mostly you.
Just as it looks as though Ken might have to defend himself.
Do you have counsel, Mr. Molansky?
No, Your Honor.
This proceeding will be put over. If it's a matter of expense, the state will provide a lawyer. Do you wish this court to appoint one for you?
That won't be necessary, Your Honor.
I recognize you, Mr. Mason. And what are you doing here?
I'm representing the defendant.
Della shows up, having been called away from her trip, and Perry immediately puts her to work without one mention of Paul Drake Jr. Back in class, Perry puts his students to work brainstorming for him. They work through the suspects, which are them.
Congratulations.
What for?
Getting our interest. You certainly put us all in the middle of Ken's defense.
And your own.
Back in front of the bail judge, Ken Molansky's got some good news and bad news. Bad news, $250,000 for bail. Good news, it's already been paid by Ken's fiance. Wah, 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 wah.
We were never engaged.
On the technicality that you never gave me a ring.
On the technicality that I never proposed.
Mr. Mason, you strike me as a fair-minded man. May I ask you a question?
No!
If a man says to you, I love you, I can't live without you, I want to be together forever.
I never said that. Exactly.
Miss Hastings, first $250,000 bail, then physical assault, then verbal assault. I'd say you were sending Ken a mixed message.
Then sum Amy up for us, Ken.
You may have guessed her family's rich. Not rich like Wellman. We're talking generations. Money with a pedigree.
That bothered you?
No, I've got nothing against being rich. I'd like to be rich. And I was in love with her, was. Then she started making all these plans about what I do, what we do. So when the scholarship to law school came along, I told her it couldn't work out.
Ah, can these two get along in the suburbs? I smell a running plot line. Perry takes the time to get to know Miss Lehman, Kimberly's roommate, and unearths Frank Wellman Jr.'s reliance on her.
I loved him. I'm still in love with him right now. I wanted Ken to hurt him. But I never wanted him dead. You've got to believe me.
Then there's an uncomfortable scene with Ken torn between two lovers, and it involves a shower and Ken without a shirt, and the less said about this, the better. Perry investigates the McDonald twins next. Big brother Scott reveals their sibling dynamic.
Inseparable, aren't you? Same undergraduate college. Kimberly even came to the same law school.
Yes, that's right.
So you want me to believe that she didn't tell you that Wellman assaulted her?
If you don't believe me, why don't you ask her?
Then Perry heads to the gym for a pickup game of basketball, investigating Judge Jeff.
Look, I'll be real honest with you. I'm not sorry Frank's dead. There's something else I'll be straight about. I didn't kill him.
Here's something I'll be straight about. You're still angry enough to have killed him.
It's time, finally, for Perry to face off with Frank Wellman Sr. Don't try the victim, said Dad Wellman. Perry can't give up on Ken, though. Should I also mention that we have more scenes of Ken kissing both Amy and Kimberly? Eesh, man, get your priorities straight. You're on trial for murder here. Ken goes to the scene of the crime and checks out the video control room. And that's where he meets Amy Jacques.
Amy!
You also be loyal enough, selfless enough.
What are you doing here?
I'm not finished. To come in here and look for clues in the middle of the night.
You promised me you were leaving.
I most certainly did not. I told you I wanted what was best for you. Which is obviously my health.
But Amy finds someone else sneaking around. You probably remember him as the wormy guy from the opening, Eugene. He's wearing a yellow sweatshirt for some no-name bar and grill, you know, in the happening downtown district of Denver. Amy shows up to the bar in a ridiculous hat and leather coat and plays hardball with Al, the barman.
How would it be if I made my own sandwich? I'd pay you, of course.
Are you crazy?
No, not seriously crazy.
In court, Perry runs roughshod over the inept security guard who saw fit to lose his keys to the supposedly impregnable moot court. Someone could have gotten in through the back door.
Sam, we both know that if someone had a key to the rear door, that person could have entered the back of the courtroom without your knowledge. Now, isn't that true?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so.
Back at the bar and grill, Amy's grilling burgers, then grilling Eugene, the wormy video guy.
Last night when I caught you breaking into the moot courtroom...
Look, lady, I wasn't there.
Eugene, my unimpeachable sources tell me that you're in charge of the video room. Now, on the night of the murder, someone was in that room. So I went back there, and I found something. But I guess it must not belong to you.
Back in court, Perry has to contend with the dopey roommate Ken has, guy named Travis Howe. He implicates Ken on direct examination, but Perry gets a reprieve for an entire weekend to prepare for his cross. Ken makes an absolute donkey's tale of himself in court by running up to Travis and trying to choke him. Come on, Ken.
Court is adjourned.
never went back to New York.
Mr. Mason, please control
Why are you
your
lying,
client, or
Travis?
he'll be held in contempt.
Damn it, what are you trying to do to me? Ken!
At dinner, Amy tells Ken her theory about the whole Eugene thing. Eugene wants the tape that from the video control room and holds Ken at gunpoint to get it. Turns out Eugene is working for someone, and they're really mean.
Forget you ever saw me, because the guys I work for are really mean. They'll kill you and enjoy it.
Back in court on Monday, Perry puts the scalpel to Travis Howe, and pretty soon his story is bleeding. Turns out that Frank Wellman Sr. suborned Howe's perjury. Frank, no!
Someone's trying to hang my client. Travis? He was working for somebody else? Unfortunately, neither of you could have known about the speeding ticket. What are you talking about? Would you like me to show you a letter from his bank? After you met with him 4 days ago, a large sum of money went into his account.
Perry goes after Frank Wellman Sr. on the stand. Perry points out what a schnook Frank Jr. was. You know, DUIs, breaking a boy's neck, having to have his way into law school paid for by Frank Wellman Sr. Yikes!
Isn't it true that your son was spoiled and violent? That he never had to face up to life because you provided more?
My son loved me, and he would have done anything for me. I would have done anything for him as well.
Back to the pointless Eugene plot cul-de-sac. It's a movie pirating ring. What a laugh riot.
I could have got some pros to pirate for me, but no, I trust you. I even send you to video school. And why? Because you're from the neighborhood.
Meanwhile, Ken takes Amy to a place of male entertainment where they catch the pirating crew in a sting, and Ken gets to chase down Eugene and play hardball while some dogs nip at his heels. Perry provides some relationship advice for Amy and Ken, and Della provides her 2 cents.
I can't say I approve of you two playing detective, but there's nothing like results.
They make a lovely couple.
Yeah, I suppose.
Perry rewatches footage from the episode's opening scene looking for a clue that will help him solve the case. Need I mention that Ken has more kissing with Amy? He's finally leaning toward Team Amy, which is probably a good thing because once Perry gets back in court, he grills Scott McDonald, who folds like a cheap card table. And it turns out it wasn't Scott. It was Kimberly McDonald who committed the crime with Scott's help.
It took 2 people to commit this crime. Your sister manipulated her roommate, Donna Lehman, making sure Ken would come to the courtroom. You made sure it would appear that Frank Wellman was still alive by playing that tape. Everyone has thought you dominated your sister. But that's not true, is it, Scott? She's the reason you're here today. She wanted revenge for the assault by Frank Wellman, and you were willing because of the blackmail. Isn't that true, Scott? Isn't it?
And Frank Wellman Sr., poor guy's looking like a budget Brian Dennehy. Perry gives Ken a talking to, so Ken promptly goes out, finds Amy, and reunites with her with his tongue. Perry comments thusly.
I knew they were perfect for each other the moment I saw her.
I really hope those crazy kids make it. I mean Perry and Della, of course. Now let's get trivial, shall we? Each episode in our trivia section, I give you 3 takeaways. A Paul is a subject worth investigating more. A Della is a deep dive on an actor or actress who guest starred in the film. Finally, a Perry is something we learn about our intrepid hero. Our Paul for this episode, it involves the complicated technology that gives the plot so much of its energy. You know, the heavily recorded courtroom that allows for playback on every major player in the prosecution, defense, and jury teams. Man, those guys have to be thanking God for digital, right? Anywho, my question, what kind of tech does the best law school courtroom in the nation afford? Is it anything like what we see here, but better? Or is this like a relic of the past that looks like computer graphics supposedly from the future generated in TV from, say, 1980? One imagines that virtual reality will be part of law school training simulation soon, but I'm only speculating. Tell us what you find, Pauls. Ardella for this episode could be none other than our man William Moses, a.k.a. Ken Molansky, a.k.a. Billy Moses, our defendant.
Well, I'd like to do more, but all I can say is thank you.
Here's 10 about Billy. Number 1, born LA 1959 to actress Marion McCargo and ad exec Richard Moses. Fun fact, Mom Marion, a tennis champion and an actress who played a murder victim and defendant in, respectively, 1964 and 1965 episodes of the original Perry Mason. Number 2, McCargo and Moses divorced when Billy was 4. McCargo married California Congressman Alfonso Bell in 1970. That congressman adopted Billy and his brothers Rick and Harry, and Moses played football and basketball in high school. Number 3, Moses attended Wesleyan for a year, but the whole serious academic scene wasn't for him. He realized he was doing it for his parents more than for himself, so he heads back west and worked as a carpenter before, number 4, attending USC and doing 18 different commercials. Before he was 21, he had his first big break, a pilot for a little evening soap opera called Falcon Crest. Number 5, prior to Perry Mason, Moses was known for 2 things, Falcon Crest and Mystic Pizza. In the former, Falcon Crest, he played Cole Ghiberti, a guy suspected of murder whose dad is a mover and shaker in town, and his mom, someone named Jane Wyman. All in all, he was on 140 episodes of the show. Number 6, Moses appeared in Mystic Pizza in 1988, where he cheated on his wife with actress Annabeth Gish. Not in real life, this is part of the plot. The other major leads in that film, of course, Julia Roberts, Lily Taylor, Vincent D'Onofrio. Here is what Roger Ebert said about the movie. Quote, I have a feeling that Mystic Pizza may someday become known for the movie stars it showcased back before they became stars. All of the young actors in this movie have genuine gifts. I think that's true about Moses, though he did not become a star anywhere near the level of Roberts or Taylor or D'Onofrio. You know someone else who made his first film appearance in Mystic Pizza? That would be Matt Damon. Number 6, Billy Moses got married in 1987 to Tracy Nelson, the daughter of rock and roll star Ricky Nelson. You may know this, but in 1985, just 2 years prior, Ricky N. died tragically in a plane crash in 1987. Tracy was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. In any case, Moses said these tragedies, plus a new marriage, plus an actor strike meant he was looking for something steady. He found it in 1989. Number 7, worked on 17 Perry Mason movies from 1989 to 1995. Here's what he said in an interview. Quote, I don't think I've ever had more fun on a job than doing those movies. We shot in Colorado. You know, Raymond would be in the office doing Perry Mason things, and I'd get a clue and chase the bad guy around and then show up in the courtroom with a brute bad guy and a clue, and he'd look brilliant. And that was the formula, but it meant that I'd have 25 days to shoot the movies and 10 days where I was just off in Colorado to go skiing or whatever. So it was really a lot of fun. But you know, while they were very successful movies, had there not been a strike, had there not been my wife, had she not been sick, would I have, in hindsight, waited to see what might have developed? Yes. Number 8, post-Mason, Moses has acted in Small Things, TV roles in How to Get Away with Murder, that was recent, and his most recent recurring role is on the soap opera General Hospital. Number 9, Moses lost both his mother and stepfather in 2004. Number 10, he divorced Tracy Nelson in 1997. They had had one child together. Moses then married Sarah Moses in 2000. They had a child together, but were divorced in 2022. Our Perry involves our man's law school time. Here's what Frank Wellman Sr. has to say about all that.
Oh, he was like that even in law school. Nobody worked harder.
What was he really like in those days?
He was a grind. Nose in the book all the time. No time for anything else. Of course, it was people like him that made people like me quit the law and go into business.
Anywho, our theme for this movie is forgetfulness. The word lethal, which means causing death, comes from the root word lethe, the mythical river where the dead drink and forget. It seems like everyone's got something they're trying to forget in this film. Frank Sr. is trying to forget his son's total schnooknook ways. Ken is trying to forget his broken relationship with Amy. And then there are the characters who would like to forget. Frank Jr. holding cheating over Scott McDonald's head like the sword of Damocles. Miss Lehman can't get Frank Jr. out of her head. Amy can't forget or move on from Ken. And of course, Perry and Della can't forget each other. I guess not forgetting isn't all bad. I guess that's why you keep the videotape around to remember what you want to forget and to make sure what you remember matches the facts. Now, let's hear a Perry proverb. Best part about these longer movies are the tiny touches of friendly camaraderie we get between Raymond Burr and Barbara Hale. Our Perry proverb comes in the movie's final line. The pair have just seen Amy admit to Ken she drove around the block 3 times waiting for him.
Would you like for me to drive around the block 3 times?
No. As always, I'll get you the first time around.
And we'll always get you the first time around the block, Perry. Now, let's grab a swig from the water cooler.
There is one thing I don't understand. Go on, Paul.
Each time we visit the water cooler, we give you deleted scenes, plot cul-de-sacs that didn't quite make the final cut. In our first, Perry asks Ken to enter court without a shirt, to sway the jury. Hubba hubba. Number 2, Ken walks in on Eugene pirating a home video copy of Mystic Pizza. Dun dun dun. Number 3, Della has fun with Perry as she pulls the car around, pulls up to the curb, then speeds up just as he's about to get in. Oh, Della, you take the cake. Our Paul from the Case of the Guilty Clients involved FAA regulations that Jeff Bronson and co. had to deal with.
We're asking the FAA for a certification for 18,000 feet. We want to make sure the plane has a little left to spare.
So we asked, were these FAA regulations realistic? Here's what I found. 18,000 feet, that's a pretty paltry height for a private jet. In fact, private jets nowadays typically fly 10,000 feet higher than commercial jets do. Reason has to do with the thinness of the air, the cost efficiency of the gas. In any case, your typical private jet in the year of our Lord 2024 will fly 40 to 45,000 feet off the ground. And 25 to 35,000 feet was the standard for the 1960s. Jeff's kind of flying low, y'all. Now let's hear a few listener letters about the case of the guilty clients. Eric Hansen writes in, quote, "Thanks for all you do on your wonderful podcast. The name Concepcion O'Higgins, which you briefly commented on, is undoubtedly a tip of the hat to the American-Mexican artist Pablo O'Higgins. He was at the peak of his minor fame the year that this episode was broadcast. Art fans like Raymond Burr, etc. would have been aware of him and his unusual name for an adopted Hispanic person." Close quote. Love it, Eric. Thank you. Then trivia maven Nancy added these nuggets. Quote, "I find the actress who portrayed Concepcion O'Higgins intriguing because of her connection to Howard Hughes. He became infatuated with her when she was about 17, bought out her contract, and signed her to his studio, RKO. Their affair lasted from 1941 to 1943. I also wondered about the Ireland-Argentina connection, so I looked it up. I did not know that so many Irish had immigrated to Argentina. I learned that they were attracted to better living conditions and a place where land was easy to acquire. Apparently, the migration was from 1830 to 1930. About 650,000 Irish descendants live in modern-day Argentina. Close quote. Thanks so much, Nancy. Great stuff. As always, I'd love to hear from you. Have a comment on the episode, the pod in general, drop me a line at theperrypod@gmail.com. Join us next time as we start season 5 off with a bang. It's Denver Pyle as Jeremiah Johnson in The Case of the Jealous Journalist. Join us, won't you? Until then, this is Jonathan Searcy saying, keep on walking that Park Avenue beat!